Welcome to Chill Thoughts regarding the DeepCool CH160. This is not a review or an objective analysis of the CH160. This is one of the best looking ITX cases I've placed on my desk in a long time. The square design motif, which is very simple, works so well that I'd prefer something like this over the Fractal Terra, and that's saying a lot. The reason why this design works is because DeepCool used consistent design language and paid attention to function at the same time. Well, mostly. The handle breaks the very consistent use of right angles, especially squares. That's why I removed it for my build. The flush screws, on the other hand, contribute to it by keeping the lines at the rear of the case very clean. To me, thumb screws are not a necessity. I almost always have a screwdriver around and will probably need one anyways if I'm going into the case for anything. I've become indifferent to the power pigtail at the end of the case. DeepCool supplied some cable management ties for it, and if you get creative, you can find some more ways to manage it. And with a cable like this, you've got a color-matched cable for the case running down the back instead of just the black one that your power supply probably came with. If they built a socket into the case would have to be slightly larger, and you'd still have a power cable hanging out of the back. The Sama IM01 Pro is also forgiven for using this same mechanism. On the construction and materials side, I'd just like to point out that everything feels about average, which is in line with the price of this case, if you could buy it, but the dust filters seem very flimsy and easy to damage, so handle them with care. Building in the CH160 is a very simple process. Remove all of the side panels and the top, including the I/O panel. Build your system like you normally would, which is very easy to reach considering all the panels are gone. There's a lot of room for fingers. And then close the system back up, put the panels back on. Very nice design and very easy to work with. Despite the lack of cable management aids and lack of space, it wasn't hard to make the build look neat. Cables running along the bottom are mostly hidden by the I/O panel, and you can find some room below the power supply and behind the GPU to tuck some cables as well. Cable management will be complicated by the addition of more fans, especially RGB fans. There are some concerns you should consider. The motherboard mounting panel was extremely flexible and flimsy feeling. At first, I thought I had fully seated my GPU properly, but there was so much movement in the motherboard panel that the GPU never fully entered the slot. It took some troubleshooting after I finished the build to realize what had happened, and the problem was consistent and repeatable. The solution was to support the motherboard panel with my hand while inserting the GPU to make sure they made full contact. If the two components don't make full contact, then you won't get any video out of your GPU, and it probably won't show up in Windows or whatever operating system you're using. So keep that in mind. If that happens to you, just make sure it's fully seated. If you have to remove dust filters for cleaning, you're going to have a bad time. In fact, you may have to remove most of your components to get them out. They're deeply embedded in the case, flimsy feeling, and are actually installed by flexing them into position. There are no magnets, clips, or screws. This design was probably chosen to save space, but I think in time that'll prove to be a poor choice. Overall, my experience building in the CH160 was great. I have concerns about the long-term maintenance, as I mentioned, but overall, I really liked it. Now, people always ask me about thermals, and I always tell you the same thing, that I don't have a climate-controlled environment or the necessary tools to be very thorough or scientific about this, but I did do some tests. My test consisted of running the Furmark CPU and GPU stress test simultaneously for about 5 or 10 minutes until the temperatures stopped climbing. My environment was about 28 degrees Celsius at the time, but that may have fluctuated a bit. Because the frequency readings fluctuate, I'll give round numbers, and like I said, not very scientific. This is using the build from the Chill Builds video, but I replaced the 7800 XT 16GB card with a 7900 XT 20GB card that I just got a very good deal on used secondhand locally. The CPU made it to about 4.36 GHz and the GPU stayed at about 2 GHz. The CPU hit a 75 degrees Celsius thermal limit that the motherboard actually automatically enforced. I thought that the 7800X3D was capable of going up to about 89 degrees Celsius. So I think this is the motherboard's doing, and I'm not sure why. But it stayed consistent through the whole test, so we'll just go with that. The only case fan installed was a 120mm Noctua NF A12X25 Chromax Black at the front. Adding an intake fan to the top and an exhaust fan to the rear raised frequencies on both the CPU and GPU cores by maybe 50 to 100 megahertz and held the temps the same. So the case breathes on its own and barely benefits from extra help. I did not run the fans at maximum RPM, but just ran them at a tolerable volume level. Like I said, not very scientific, but I hope these results help you. I'm happy with the CH160. I think it's a very solid case, especially for the original retail price, and I may keep this one for long-term use. It's not without flaws, but it's good enough to earn my approval. Please let me know in the comments what you think of this case, and what cases you want to see in the future. I may revisit some past builds soon too. Thank you for watching, and have a good day.